it's a deliberately planned false flag or whether it is accidental or a blowback or an unintended consequence, it's always used to expand the state.
If you're ready to stand on the line, if you're ready to fight back and serve it to the criminals trying to enslave you and steal your wealth through monetary creation and exorbitant taxation, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. I've personally been buying gold and silver from JM Bullion for over 2 years. They offer the best prices over spot that I can find, and I've never had a problem with an order. If you're looking to trade in some of your fiat paper for real money, check out jmbullion.com today.
Hey, this is Kim Jong. Your country no good to make friend. Why turn off the internet? I was trying to watch interview on the YouTube.
And this is Vladimir Putin. What's happening for oil prices? Not so good for ruble. I'm hoping I don't find out you guys is involved.
Maybe you need go preparedness.com. Check it out, supply store, in case somebody turn off your internet.
Or could be turning off your electricity. These things happen.
They have a so good everyday carry concealed carry sling with patches more cool than a Dennis Rodman.
And having MOLLE-compatible individual first aid kits with IBD, chest seal, quick clot, tourniquet, EMT shears, and much more. Even when I don't wear a shirt, I having IFAC from Prepper Recon with me.
So go to preparedness.com and click Store tab on the top of the home page.
While you still can.
Hey, Preppers and Patriots. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important and also one of the most overlooked aspects of preparedness, and that's financial preparedness. It gets skipped over a lot because it's not really sexy. It's not like going out and getting a new AK-47 or stockpiling food or buying medical equipment and all of the cool zombie apocalypse stuff. But it's probably the most important aspect to physical preparedness once you get beyond spiritual preparedness and physical preparedness, which is making sure that you're in shape and that you've got the skills that you're going to need to get through whatever situation you happen to come across. And it's certainly something that we cover here on the show a lot, is that one of the biggest threats is the ongoing economic crisis. So personal finance has to be at the front of your preparedness plan. So this year, for 2015, if you still haven't gotten on a budget, if you're still just kind of whatever's coming in is what you're spending and you're not really tracking it, commit to getting on a budget this year. Now, a budget is any method you want to use to track how much money you've got coming in and how much you've got going out. And it needs to be something besides, okay, well, the bank account's not on zero, so I've got money to spend. And then when it's on zero, okay, well, I need to get that check in there pretty quick. That's not a good plan. You need some method of tracking all of that. And there's a million ways that you could do it. Probably the most low-tech way you could do it is to just get a notebook and a pen and just write everything down. Every time you get a paycheck, you put that in one column, and every time you spend something, you put it on the other column. You could also use an Excel spreadsheet. That's great. And you can use the envelope system, which is you'll have envelopes for each category of spending. So food, utilities, mortgage, insurance, vehicle, and vehicle might cover everything, like could cover oil changes and changing tires, maintenance and repairs, and it could also be money that you're saving up to buy another vehicle when the one you're driving finally gives up the ghost and is ready for the junkyard. So for the envelope system, what you would do is you would write down how much you're going to spend every week for food. And let's say it's $100 for your whole family for your food. And we'll be getting Coupon Prepper back on the show very soon to talk about some ways to get that cost down so that you can maybe reallocate that money to either long-term storage food or paying down debt or wherever it needs to go. because every penny you save really is a penny earned, and it's more than a penny earned, because if you're making $1,000 a week and you've got 7.5% of that going to Social Security and Medicare taxes, and you're paying 15 to 20% in taxes, then after you're done paying your taxes, you've only got $730 left. Now, you still got to pay sales taxes, you still got to pay taxes on your house, you still got to pay rent and all of that. But just once you take out the taxes, so we said we use the example of you're making $1,000 and you're paying 20% in federal and 7% to Medicare and Social Security. So you're only making $730. So in order to spend $730, you have to make $1,000. So if you calculate that to every dollar that you spend, then it makes you look at money completely different. So not even including state taxes and everything else that you got to pay, just federal and Medicare and Social Security, you have to make 137% of what you're going to spend. So let's say you're going to buy a new bike that costs $100. Well, you actually have to earn $137 to be able to afford that $100 bike, because after taxes, you had to make $137 just to have $100. So if you start looking at your spending like that, you're going to value your money a little bit more, because you're going to see the real cost of the things that you have to purchase, because it's not actually the cost, it's how much money did you have to make in order to have that much left over to spend that. So I got off on a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but back to the envelope system. So we're going to say you come in, you've got $1,000, you've lost 27% to taxes, and now you've got $730 left. So out of that, you've got $100 going into food. Maybe you've got $100 that's going into utilities. So all of your utilities for the month were $400. You'd have to put aside $100 in each week's paycheck into that envelope. And then you've got rent or mortgage, whatever your insurance is, and then whatever you've got left over. Now, if you're going to go by the Dave Ramsey model, one of the things you have to do is you have to pay yourself first. So you're going to have an envelope, and it's going to have to come before all the other envelopes that are for saving. And if you're a Christian, obviously, even before that should be your tithe. So you're going to have to first take out your tithe, then you're going to take out what you're going to allocate to saving. And that's the idea of paying yourself first. Because if you save what you've got left over, you'll never save anything, because there will never be anything left over. What you have to do is just allocate how much you're going to save, and then you just have to make cuts, and you just have to figure out how you're going to do without the other things that you would have done with that money that you're saving. For Christians, it's the same thing with tithing. If you give God what you've got left over, you're never going to give him anything, because there will never be anything left over, because you'll always find somewhere and something to spend that money on. And you just have to make a priority out of tithing, and you have to make a priority out of saving. Otherwise, they just won't get done. It's just like reading your Bible. If you read your Bible when you've got extra time, you'll never read your Bible. You have to dedicate yourself and carve out time in your schedule and say, okay, from this time to this time is when I'm going to dedicate myself to praying or reading the Bible or listening to praise music or listening to Bible studies on MP3 or whatever it is that you do for your spiritual development. Because if you don't, you'll never do it. It's all about discipline, and the budgeting's the same thing. It's the same type of discipline as like a diet, and a diet, that's all it is budgeting. You're budgeting how much energy you're bringing in and how much energy you're taking out. And if you've got more calories coming in than you've got going out, then you're going to gain weight. And if you've got less calories coming in than you've got going out, then you're going to lose weight. And it's the same thing with your budget. If you've got more money coming in than you've got going out, then you're going to be able to save money. But if you've got more money going out than you've got coming in, you're going to end up in debt. One of the questions I get asked a lot, and I get a lot of emails and comments on the website about, is if we have a credit crisis or a currency crisis or a banking system collapse, what's going to happen to the individuals that are in debt? Well, I think that the 2008 crisis was a perfect example of that. That the banks got bailed out. They were too big to fail. But the individual, if you can't pay your mortgage, then you lose your home and you're on the street, and it's too bad for you. And I think that that's how it's always going to be. I think that the people in power are always going to make sure that the laws are swayed in their favor. We've seen that with the bankruptcy reform laws, where depositors are now treated as unsecured creditors. Pretty much everything else is put in front of them in a solvency crisis. Everybody's going to be prioritized before the depositor. So if you put your money in a bank, you're the last person to get paid. I think that that's how it's going to be for people that have credit card debt, or you owe money for your car or your mortgage. I think if the system goes away, they're still going to figure out a way to hold you accountable, either after the currency's revalued, after the new system comes up in place. I think that you're still going to be on the hook for what you owed, but your assets are probably going to be wiped out, especially if they're in the banking system or stocks or anything like that, because that's how it always happens. It's the little guy that gets stuck, and the people at the top always make sure that their butt's covered. Debt's a horrible cycle, and that's just one that you just never want to get into. But it's something that happens to everybody because, a lot of things, it's hard to actually to pay cash for them. But you want to really try to do without the things that you don't have to have until you have the money for them. And so that's, buying clothes on credit cards, and buying TVs and electronics and things like that on credit cards. You have to just discipline yourself and wait until you've been able to save up the money to buy those things. I understand that some people have to have a certain type of car for work, and maybe they can't drive a jalopy to work until they can save up to buy a better car. Some folks, they either have to lease cars or they have to buy a car on debt, which if you can avoid it, it's so much better to avoid that. I think probably the only debt that's really that I would ever recommend getting into is for a house or for an income property. If you're going into debt to buy a house, and your mortgage payments are going to paying off that house rather than going to pay off somebody else's mortgage on their apartment building, then at least that's equity that you're gaining. And for vehicles, if you can avoid it, by all means try to do that, because if you pay cash for an older model car and drive it, and you've got your envelope that you're putting money every week into being ready to replace that automobile when it finally bites the dust, then you're going to have a little bit more money by the time it conks out, hopefully, and you'll be able to buy a little bit nicer car. And then you do that cycle over, and then hopefully next time you'll be able to buy a little bit nicer car. Also, you want to make sure that out of that savings envelope, the first thing you want to do is build up an emergency fund. So we're using the example of making $1,000 a week, and let's say that your total bills come up to $2,000 a month. After your giving and after your taxes and everything else that you've got to pay, we'll say that you've got $100 left each week. You want to put that $100 into an envelope or an account or something that's going to start building up a cushion for a rainy day. And rainy days come. When they come, a lot of times it rains for a long time. A lot of times the car will break down the same day that you have to go to the doctor, or the same day that the washing machine conks out. So all of that stuff sometimes comes at once, and you got to have a rainy day fund and a savings fund for things that go wrong, because in this world things go wrong, and that's just how things go. People's jobs close up and people get laid off, and all types of financial hardships come along, and you have to be prepared for those things, because that's the thing that's going to happen more often than the zombie apocalypse, is that you're going to a really, really tough financial position, and that puts strain on marriages, and it puts extra stress on you that makes your immune system not operate as well. So this is just so healthy all the way around for your relationships, for your physical health, for your mental health, for your spiritual health, to be financially prepared. So this is definitely something that's worth doing. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Katie Armor offers affordable body armor, including level 3 trauma plates made of AR-500 steel. They can endure multiple rounds from pistols and rifles up to 7.62 NATO. Their plates are available with Rhino Linings coatings to reduce SPA. Go to katiearmor.com, that's CATI armor.com today. Now, back to the budgets. A great place to get a good budget form, basic budget form, is DaveRamsey.com, and I'm going to have a link in today's show notes to get to his Gazelle Budget Lite, which is basically a free online form that you can go through, and you can put in your income, and then the very, very top thing he's got on there, which it's sort of pre-prioritized for you, is charity. So, there you're going to put your tithe. So now you've got your income, it's $1,000 a week, and you're going to put your tithe, you're going to put $100 in there. If you just don't have the faith, if you just can't see giving God 10%, start out at 5%, start out at 2%, start out at 1%, with making it a goal to eventually get yourself in a financial position to where you can be faithful and be obedient to God and give him 10%. And then the very next column is savings. So that's going to allow you to set how much your savings are going to be. And if you can get that between 5 or 10%, that's great. The next column is housing. So that's going to be whatever your rent or your mortgage is right now. You might have to evaluate that. You might have to say, do I really need this fancy of an apartment? Could we get by on something a little bit less and save a little bit more money for a down payment to buy our own home? If you've been living in an apartment for a long time and maybe it's a really nice apartment that's costing you a lot of money, you're not getting anywhere on your savings plan. Maybe you could live in a slightly smaller place with less amenities and be able to save money to eventually get your own place. And the next thing is utilities, and that's probably going to include your electric and your water and your cable and your internet service. And look at all of that stuff and see if there's anything that you can cut there. We completely cut our cable out. We have the Roku box, which you buy one time, and then after that it just runs off your internet service. And so you don't ever have to pay another fee for the Roku. You just buy the box one time, and it's about $100. A lot of great options. There's a lot of junk on TV anyway, especially if you're paying for cable. There's just so much stuff on there that's just borderline pornographic, very, very offensive to God, I think, and a lot of bad language. And it seems like using God's name as a swear word isn't considered bad language anymore. And just primetime television, people are very loose about misusing God's name. The next row on the budget form is food, because that's obviously very high priority. Next is transportation, and we talked about that. You want to make sure that you've got enough money in there for, if you're not subdividing gas and vehicle, then you want to make sure that you've got enough money in transportation for gas, enough money in there that you're going to have money in that account or that envelope or however you're doing your money for when you need new tires, for when you need an oil change, for when you need to change the alternator and get a new radiator and buy new hoses and belts and all the kind of stuff that just goes wrong in a car. And then the next row is clothing, and make sure you're being smart about that. Ross, TJ Maxx, there's a lot of places like that have name brand good clothing for a lot less money. It's just that it's not quite as nice of an atmosphere as like Nordstrom or Macy's or something like that. And then the next column is medical and health. Depending on how hard you got hit with Obamacare, we certainly didn't get any free insurance out of it. Our insurance was $85 a month each, and that was for a very high deductible plan. That plan went away with Obamacare. And so now what we would have to pay to have insurance, $400 each. And that's for roughly the same deductible that we had with the $85 a month plan. This year, we're just opting to pay the 1% penalty. Whatever our adjusted gross income is, we'll pay 1% of that. So let's say you're making $50,000 a year, 1% of that's $500. So that's going to be much more doable than $800 a month for us. It's a gamble, but of course, I guess with Obamacare, if you get sick, then you can go get insurance then. The next row on the budget is for personal. That's going to be things like haircuts and for ladies, makeup and things like that. And then there's a column for recreation, and you have to plan for recreation, because you can't just all work and no play makes Jack a bad boy, right? I mean, we've all heard that. So you do have to budget to make sure that you've got a little recreational time. It doesn't have to be a big budget. A lot of people spend way too much money in this category, going out to eat every weekend and going out to a movie every single weekend. Maybe you're going to have to cut down on the places that you go out to eat. Maybe it's going to have to be something that you do a little less frequently. You make sure that you got a little money in there for anniversaries and birthdays and things like that, but it's not something that you necessarily do every single weekend. Then finally, debts. And it seems like debts maybe should have been a higher priority than saving. But the thing is with that is that if you've got debts and you're trying to hurry up and pay your debts off, that's great, and that's certainly something that you need to do. But if you're doing it at such a pace that you're not able to save any money and you don't have that rainy day fund, what ends up happening, you lose a job or you get in a position where you're not able to earn money, then you're not able to continue servicing those debts anyway. So if you're just paying the minimum until you've got that cushion aside, then when you get in trouble, you can continue to service your debts that you have, whether it's credit card debt or car loan or your mortgage or whatever. There's different ideologies on how to pay off your debts. Some people will say pay off the highest interest first, and that seems to make the most sense. But then there's other people like Dave Ramsey that will tell you to pay off the smallest debts first. And his reasoning is that even though it might not be the highest interest rate, that once you pay off that small debt item, it'll give you a victory to where you've got something to get a little mental energy off of, to where you can keep going and pay off the next highest debt and the next highest debt and the next highest debt. From a purely logical point of view, it would make more sense to pay off the highest interest rate, which most of the time is going to be credit cards. Whatever you can do to avoid credit cards. Dave Ramsey will say, don't ever have a credit card. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that they're a really good opportunity to get in a lot of trouble if you misuse them. But if you're a disciplined person and you've got a good budget and you can do things right, it's pretty hard to rent a car. It's pretty hard to do a lot of things without credit cards. You can get points for just paying your bills and things like that. We get points for Outdoor World. So, we get a lot of our camping supplies and prepping supplies with our points from our Outdoor World points that we're building up by just paying our phone bill and just paying our electric bill and our bills with that credit card. It costs us absolutely nothing because we pay the balance in full at the end of every month without varying. We always do that. So it doesn't cost us anything. We never pay it. The second that you have to start paying interest payments, you've lost all of the gains from whatever reward points you'd be getting from your credit card. Also, we don't do anything that has an annual fee. I know that there's some out there where you pay a low annual fee, and if you spend a whole lot of money, that you can get a lot of airline miles and travel for free and things like that. And for some people that might work, but we just don't do anything that has an annual fee on it at all. Now, how much should that rainy day fund? Well, at the very minimum, you want to try to save up 1 month's worth of bills. So for the example that we were using, we said that all of the bills were $2,000 a month. So you definitely want to get at least enough to pay 1 month's worth of bills. And that's your first goal. That's before you ever start putting any extra money besides what your absolute minimum is to be paying down those debts. Now, once you've got that, you could maybe start allocating a little bit more towards debts, but you want to keep saving until you've got a 6 months worth of expenses in that account for your rainy day emergency fund. Because a lot of times when people lose jobs, it can easily take you 6 months to find a new job. Or if you get injured and you can't work, it can easily be 6 months before you're able to return. So that's not an obscene amount of money to have to save up, or a lot of overkill of money that's just sitting around not doing anything and not making any money. Now, how much of that are you going to keep in cash in your house because you don't trust the banking system, and how much of that are you going to keep in a savings account in the bank? Well, that's going to be up to you. We've seen what happened in Cyprus when they had to close the banks, and they took a large portion of the money from folks that had savings accounts over a certain amount. There's certainly been plenty of other events around the world throughout time that they've had what they call banking holidays, where they just close the door of the banks and they say nobody's getting any money out of the bank until we figure out what we're going to do about this crisis. And if all your money's in the bank, you're not getting it out. So you should definitely figure out how much you want to keep at home and keep some portion in a safe place in your house. If you've got guns and things like that, you need to have safes for those anyway, and that needs to be bolted to the floor. So a gun safe's a great place to keep your cash. And if you've got guns and you've got small children in the house, you absolutely need to have a safe. There was just a lady in Idaho not too long ago, and she turned her back for 1 second, and her kid got out of her gun and actually shot her with it. And it was a toddler, and just a horrific that now her husband and her son has to go through because she's no longer with them. They didn't have control of their weapons around small children. So that's a horrible thing, and great reason to get a good safe. And of course, if it's paper currency, that's something that you can put in a dry box, an ammo box, and bury that in the backyard, because it's not going to, especially if you got a plastic dry box, plastic ammo box to keep that in, then it's not going to send off any kind of a metallic signature that anybody's going to find with a metal detector. So there's all kinds of clever places that you can figure out to keep a little cash to make sure that you've always got some cash and it's not easily found by a burglar. But make sure you've got some around the house, because when they close up the banks, if they close up the banks, you're going to wish you had some. And a lot of people think that the dollar is going to die all of a sudden, and I don't think so. I think that it'll probably be in the beginning. I think that people are going to take cash in any type of a really deep economic crisis. I think that cash is probably going to be king for the early stages of that, and it's going to continue to be currency, because a lot of people don't know what gold and silver are. I think that gold and silver are a fantastic way to preserve your wealth for the other side of the crisis. In the initial stages, I think that it's still going to be 20s and 10s and 5s and 1s that you're going to want to have around to buy the things that you need in a currency crisis. And then for people that work on a commission, or waiters or waitresses or folks out there that you don't make the same amount of money from one week to the next week, Dave Ramsey also has a irregular income budget form too, and that's great for you, and it's going to work very similar, and it's just you're going to go through and you're going to fill up the priority account or envelope, however you work that and wherever you keep that money. You're going to fill that up as you make it. So you're going to make sure that if you only make $100, that you're going to have your rent covered, and if you only make $200 for that week, then you're going to have your rent and your electric covered. And if you only make $500, you're going to have your rent and your electric and your food. And it's just going to go down the line in the list of priorities to make sure that you've got those covered. And then if you make a little bit more money the following week, and there was something in the past week that account didn't get filled because you didn't make enough that week, then you can go back and top off that account. And I'm going to have links to both of those budget forms from Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey has a great course called Financial Peace. It's available at a lot of churches. My church is doing it real soon. We went to it back before we got married, and it's really helped us, my wife and I, to be on the same page from the get-go. And so we sort of already had this idea of how we were going to do our money and how we were going to do our budget since before we were married, because we took that and it was that's a great idea, and I think that's a really fantastic idea for anybody that's thinking about getting married too, is go take a budgeting class together and make sure that you're on the same page about money, because like I said, that's a big bone of contention and a cause of a lot of divorces, and creates a lot of conflict in families when people aren't on the same page with the budget and the spending. That helps a lot. I'm saying a lot of great stuff about Dave Ramsey, and I think for budgeting and I think for getting out of debt, I think that he is absolutely fantastic. Now, once you get into savings and you start getting into investment, he's got some very different ideas than what I subscribe to. And I don't really give investing advice or get into that on Prepper Recon at all. But I really don't like paper assets at all. I really just don't like stocks at all. There's very, very few out there that aren't the company's not in some way involved in something that I feel like goes against my morals. Let's take ExxonMobil for example. They're a corporate sponsor of the Council on Foreign Relations, so that's not a company I can invest in. Let's think of another company, Apple. Apple does diversity training, which basically takes people into a room and says, it doesn't matter what the Bible says about gay marriage or what the Bible says about this. Here's what you have to think, and here's how you have to believe if you're going to work for this company. And they have diversity training that basically tells you that we're right and God's wrong. So I can't really own stock in a company that tells their employees that. So there's just a whole host of things and a whole list of reasons that I really can't own too many stocks because of my personal moral convictions. So I don't really like paper assets, and Dave Ramsey's big into mutual funds, which it's almost impossible to find a mutual fund that doesn't own Apple or Exxon for that matter. So, and almost every stock that you get into, if you look long and hard enough, you're going to find some way that company doesn't measure up to your personal morals. And the Bible says not to be unequally yoked. And when you own a stock like that, you're part owner of that company, and you're partially responsible for whatever that company does. Now, if you've got some corporate account, or you're a public servant and you're getting a IRA match or something like that, to where you don't really have any choice in the matter, then that's probably a different story. But if it's just your money and you can do whatever you want to do with it, I much prefer Robert Kiyosaki's investment strategy, which is buying hard assets. And one of the things he likes so much is real estate, because number one, you can leverage it, and rental property, and you can get income out of it. So you can get, whether the price of the rental property goes up or down, you're still getting income out of it. So I really like his ideas a lot better than Dave Ramsey's on investing. And also, Dave Ramsey categorically says don't buy gold, and it's a horrible investment. And maybe it is a horrible investment, but I don't buy it for an investment. I buy gold and silver for insurance in case the dollar continues the path that it's been on since 1971, where it's lost 97% of its value. So all it has to do is just keep doing what it's doing, and gold and silver over the long run will preserve your wealth a lot better than a bunch of paper dollars in a bank and getting 0.001% interest, or whatever they're giving right now, because it's ridiculous. Now, the official story may be that quantitative easing has been completely ended and they're not printing any more money. Even if that's true, all of that money that they've already printed has the potential to cause so much more damage, and there's so much of it that's being held outside of America. More and more countries start trying to move away from the dollar, and those dollars start flooding back into America. It's really going to create a lot of problems for us. So if you haven't done it yet, this is a year. Get on a budget. Start tracking what you've got coming in, what you've got going out. It's probably the first time you write out a budget. It's probably not going to be the budget that you're still going to have 6 months from now. It's probably going to take a little tweaking from time to time. The first one you write out might last you a week, and then you're going to say, nope, I need so much more money than that for food, and we really don't spend that much money on utilities. So then you're going to have to make an adjustment, and then maybe that one's going to last you 2 weeks. You're going to say, the car broke down, and I got to get that fixed. I'm going to have to allocate a little bit more money towards transportation. And you're going to say, maybe we really don't need to go out to eat so much, and I can pull a little bit out of that so that I can save a little bit more and get these credit card bills paid off. And if they're causing you a problem, get the scissors out and cut those credit cards up, and don't worry about the points and don't think about any of that stuff. If you just don't have the discipline for that, then cut them up, forget about them. 5 years from now, you get all your debts paid off, and you're very disciplined, and you want to go out and get a new credit card after that, and you know that you're going to be disciplined about it, then maybe you can do that. But if spending's an addiction for you, or shopping, or anything like that, and you've had any kind of debt problems, definitely leave the credit cards alone for a few years to make sure that you've got the discipline to handle having one. And if you don't, you're going to have the wisdom to know and get the scissors out and cut it up. But get on a budget, whatever you do, and it's going to bring so much more peace to your life, and you're going to be so much more well prepared once you get that cushion set up and you've got that money set aside for all the things that just happen in life. Happy prepping, and God bless, and make sure you go to prepperecon.com if you're listening on YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes, and we'll have links to those budget forms. God bless.
In the post-apocalyptic thriller, American Exit Strategy by best-selling author Mark Goodwin, America is on the cusp of financial annihilation. Matt and Karen Baer face the challenges of Main Street during a full-scale financial meltdown. Government borrowing and monetary creation have reached their limits. When funds are no longer available for government programs, widespread civil unrest erupts across the country. Matt and Karen are forced to move to a more remote location, and their level of preparedness is revealed as being much less adequate than they believed prior to the crisis. Meanwhile, Paul Randall, a third-party presidential candidate, arises to push back against the welfare and warfare spending that have bankrupted the country. American Exit Strategy uses survival fiction to take an in-depth look at the real-life politics and economics behind the issues that are likely to trigger a currency collapse. Buy your copy in paperback, Kindle, or audio edition at Amazon.com today. American Exit Strategy is a work of fiction until it becomes history.